I hid my disability for so long, for almost 20 years. The biggest stuff for me was literally going into a store and being able to not hide my disability. I stopped negotiating with myself. Motivation requires negotiation and a specific emotional state to do something. That's all it takes. You don't have to have this crazy Jocko Willink type mindset where you're just a hardcore Navy SEAL. Oh, you must have had an amazing network or an upbringing or anything. Like I grew up in the ghetto. My parents had no money. We went to like churches to get food and stuff. What does a $5,000 speaker look like? What does a $7,500 speaker look like? What does a $50,000 speaker look like? How can I look like that? All diets that are successful share one common principle, and that's caloric control. A good speaker doesn't always have a prepared talk, but is always prepared to talk.
Welcome to the Learn with Lowell show. That teaser was of Chris Ruden. Typically on the show, which is for the everyday mammal, we learn about science, leadership, and how people build their changes to the world. Today with Chris, who is an author of The Upper Hand and one of the most sought after speakers around. We get to learn about his transition from hiding to standing out to being a paid speaker to helping others with diabetes, with fitness and nutrition, books, his time competing on Titan Games with The Rock. Many of you and most of you will really enjoy this episode. Please subscribe, like, and comment. And finally, let's stay curious and learn about Chris Ruden. Is there something you've always wanted to highlight or talk about that people don't normally hit you with? There's always kind of like a highlight reel of stories that people ask you for, but I'm kind of curious, is there something that you don't normally get to talk about?
Honestly, I think people see the big stuff. They see the exciting stuff, like the magazines or the TV show or the records and all that. They see that. But what I want more people to see and understand is like I hid my disability for so long, for almost 20 years. The biggest stuff for me was literally going into a store and being able to not hide my disability. So I think when people see my name or my face, they're like, oh, you did that TV show with The Rock. Oh, you lifted 675 pounds. Oh, and I'm like, the biggest feat I've ever accomplished was literally being able to not hide my disability while I'm going to buy soup, you know? And that's what meant the most to me. But I think a lot of people fixate on the explosions and the shiny stuff. But to me, that was the shiny stuff.
No,
that was the moment that meant the most to me, you know? So I wish more people kind of saw that and were as excited as I am, but you know.
Yeah, no, I completely get it. And at the same time, I wonder if maybe they just don't know how to address the topic because
it's uncomfortable.
I don't mind because I have disability as well, and I would have moments where like my entire arm would be swollen to the point where I couldn't move my fingers, and so I know exactly what you're talking about when you're walking out, and I'd put like mittens on or anything. It's like if anything, I was drawing more attention to it, but like you just want to go about your day, but. I think it was the diabetes that made you realize that you needed to change things. If you if it wasn't for that, do you think you would have just continued going on, not just allowing yourself to be yourself, or how do you think your life would have been going without that?
That's a really good question. Type 1 diabetes was one of the many moments that led to me becoming who I am today. And I don't mean that in a cliche way, like becoming successful. I mean, becoming comfortable with who I am and really figuring out who I am and not being who I thought everyone else wanted me to be. So I think a lot of people are waiting for this Disney moment of like, poof, everything's amazing, winning the lotto, meeting the right person. It's always something that's going to change their lives. And I don't really believe that way. I believe many little things will lead up to that change, you know, if you allow it. So having diabetes put me in a hospital to where I was like, okay, I have to do something. This just got worse progressively, but do I want to make it worse myself? You know, and in my keynotes, I often talk about when people get a flat tire, they don't set the car on fire.
Yeah.
You know, but we do that. And I had to figure out a way to stop doing that. And diabetes was a very harsh realization that, hey, man, the path you're going on is only going to get really hard if you keep doing what you're doing.
Was it so it was a good catalyst for change, but when you were hiding yourself, and that's just like my colloquialism for, you know, to summarize, but were people reinforcing it in terms of like making you feel like you didn't belong, or was it like in retrospect, do you think it was like entirely internal, or do you think external was being pushed on you as well?
I think, and to speak general before I speak specifically about myself, I think the majority of stuff is internal for most of us. It's the narrative we tell ourselves. And I have a quote behind me on the other wall that says, we often suffer in our imagination more than we do our reality. And it's true because we make up stories what people could believe. And even though it's a possibility, we convince ourselves that it's a fact. And something we've learned is feelings are not facts. Just
Mm-hmm.
because you feel certain people are thinking a certain way about you, you're making this whole thing up in your head. Not only is it fake, but the feeling you're getting is real, which sucks. So for me personally, people did not reinforce my need to hide
Mm-hmm.
directly, but I would say indirectly they almost did because they allowed it. They'd never talked about it. It was the elephant in the room that was never talked about, and it was so obvious. And part of me, the selfish part of me, wants to be like, oh, I wish people would have, brought that to my attention. But that wasn't their responsibility. It was mine. But sometimes reinforcing behaviors is not just saying they're okay, it's allowing them in the
Mm-hmm.
first place. So I feel like, in a way, a lot of people accepted that I was hiding, and that's just what it was. And that's what it felt like for 17 years.
Makes sense. The when I was going through college, I was going through the ICU and ER as well, and I had teachers who were very against accommodating that, and would like laugh and like, so it was like one of those things where it's like externally I'm getting hit in a bunch of different different places
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
Um, did so it does sound, I mean, positive in that regard, where like no one was like I'm forgetting the word, but it's a very obvious word, where they're taking you and like separating you because of it. It
Almost
sounds
like
like they
segregating you or
yeah, yes,
discriminating.
yes,
Yeah.
thank you, my God.
So in the beginning, like especially middle school was terrible for everyone, but for
Yeah.
me, I was definitely made fun of. I grew
Mm-hmm.
up in a super poor area, so like I already stood out, and then from there, I literally had a disability that I didn't hide at the time, so I was made fun of for the way I looked, and I felt that. I was in certain schools where Thanksgiving, you put your hand on a piece of paper and you use your other hand to trace around it to make a turkey. Well, my left hand turkey did not look like anyone else's turkey. And that was kind of embarrassing to me because I was like, man, I just wanted to fit in. I wanted to do the assignment. I'm the only kid in class who can't do the assignment because I physically can't. And that was something I pushed back on a lot. Was I was so competitive. So I was like, yes, I can do this. I can do this. And it took me a long time to accept that there are certain things physically that I can't really do. I've learned to adapt around a ton of stuff, but there's some stuff I just can't do. And I have to be okay with that. Otherwise, I'm fighting a situation that I can't control at all. And it's just exhausting my mental health and exhausting me as a person.
Mm-hmm. The something I've noticed a lot in people is that like physical fitness seems to be a really good catalyst to like break up mental jam. I think like even if you have depression, for instance, they talk about like just start as much as you can, and just work out a little bit and do better every day. I'm wondering how quickly after like you started making these transitions to more healthier lifestyle and being where you could be more standing out, where like fitness came into it. I know eventually it became like very very great, deadlifting and all these great things that you've been doing. But was it immediate after like being in the hospital, or was it? I mean, I guess if it was consistently there the entire time. But I'm curious if that was a part of like kind of helping you along as well, just like the drive for the physical fitness that for many people seems to be like one of the key components that helps them get over those humps.
It definitely lit a fire under my ass to be like, okay, you got to do something, and the world doesn't owe you anything. So like, what are you gonna do? And I was always that one-handed guy in a two-handed world that just existed, and machines weren't made for me. So I had to find a way to adapt, and it was tough. But everyone's different, so I had to find how my differences could help me or just not hurt me more.
Mm-hmm.
And I got into fitness right after diabetes. And I saw magazines of like people with muscle, and I was told I couldn't do that because of my disability, and especially because my diabetes, how hard it was to like manage. So I took that as a challenge, and I was like, all right, let me learn. And I wanted to bodybuild so bad, but I was like this tiny little 140-pound kid in high school. I didn't know what I was doing. So I was trying to build muscle. I was drinking disgusting protein shakes and reading magazines of like bad information. But I eventually got strong enough to start deadlifting and squatting and bench pressing, finding ways to balance like the bar on my residual limb. And I did my first ever powerlifting competition. I ended up winning. And then from there, I just kept going and going and
Mm-hmm.
going. I wouldn't say I actively made the choice to be healthy. I think I was more desperate and flailing at that point mentally. and the gym was the one space where I could like calm my mind and focus on what I'm doing instead of focus on all the other worries, doubts, fears that were going on in my head. So the gym became kind of like therapy for me. And I fell in love with the art, all of that, but really it was a mental thing. And it
Mhm.
still is to this day.
It's the same for me when I was going through the similar experiences. Um, I wasn't necessarily doing it intentionally. It was just like one thing I could do. You know, it's like one thing you
Yeah.
can do is, you know, you can lift a weight or something. Like now, like the gym is kind of like a religious thing for
Yeah.
me. It's like some people go to church, like I go to gym or like I
Yeah.
exercise to some extent, and it feels really good to have that reinforcement. And at the same time, I know people that when they first start, like they'll, like you say in a number of your talks, like they'll try to do a lot. It's more about being consistent. But I'm curious, when you did start, were there times where you stopped, or you I don't know, reached a point where you kind of gave up, or you had like a valley of like not doing what you're supposed to be doing to continue working out effectively? And if so, like how did you like convince yourself to have the discipline to keep going when you're still working it out? I think that's one of the big thing. Some of the things I've noticed is that when people first start going, they'll maybe do it for like 2 weeks, and then like the motivation is like, oh, I don't know, I'm not seeing anything. It's like, why am I not 10 pounds lighter in 2 weeks? But you know, it's like takes time. But I'm curious, like, did you face that as well? And like, what were some of your like strategies to get past that?
You used some interesting words I would want to call back. Originally used the word discipline, and then you switched to the word motivation, and we're going to
Mm-hmm.
talk about
Yeah, they're
that.
two different things.
Very different, and very different cues and very different actions from that. No one is motivated to go to work. No one. No one. There's days where I wake up and I'm like, I don't want to do anything. I want to lay in bed and tell me. I know anyone listening agrees with me. There are many days where like, this is it. This is my last day. I'm quitting. I'm going to sleep. I'll wake up in a few days. But discipline kicks in and you're like, I have to go. You tell yourself you have to go, you know? And I'm going to ask you now, do you have a job?
Yeah.
Of course. Do you need to work?
No, but I know where you're going. But I like
Exactly.
working. I love working.
Exactly. So even if you didn't like working, you had a job, you need to make money, to support your house, whatever. You don't need to, you could be homeless. And if you could be homeless, but you decide not to be, it's a choice. So if you have the ability to turn a desire into a necessity with working, you could do that with fitness. The problem is discipline is a choice, one. And I'm not trying to be hardcore or anything like that. It's literally one, it's like going to the job. You go, you huff and puff, but you still make it. There was many times where I went to the gym and I half-assed it. I quarter-assed it. I just was at the gym because I knew I needed to go. And it's better than doing nothing. So I went to the gym, even did a few sets, maybe walk on a treadmill, and then go home. I at least did it. And I proved to myself that everything told me not to go, but I still went. I stopped negotiating with myself. And that is the difference between motivation and discipline. Motivation requires negotiation and a specific emotional state to do something. Discipline doesn't require any prerequisites to get stuff done. You
Mm.
have to do it. Just do it anyways. Just do it anyways. I follow every thought with just do it anyways. I don't feel like doing this, do it anyways. Easier said than done, better done than said. We can get into that conversation, but at the end of the day, just commit to it. Like you do your job, like you do the other responsibilities that you never give up on, even when you want to, because motivation comes after action, not before. You get motivated as you keep going. You don't wait to be motivated to keep going.
Did it? How long? I think that's a like a time horizon is also one of those things for developing these types of confidence in yourself to know it'll work out. Did How long did it take you before you'd have like some level of confidence in pushing through to keep going with your goals?
I love that you said that. That makes me so happy. To this day, there's still no confidence that it's going to work out.
Okay, that's good.
That doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. I don't know the future, but I know two things. And I think Ashton Kutcher said something similar along these lines. Could be completely someone else. I could be butchering this, but if you do nothing, you're guaranteed nothing will happen. If you do something, you might get to your goal. I will take a might over a definitely not any day. Any day. So I knew if I did nothing, I'm definitely not going to get there. But if I did something, I might get there. There
Mhm.
was no point in my beginning to lift weights. I have two fingers on my left hand and a shorter left arm. I had no clue how I was going to lift up a bar, let alone deadlift 675 pounds when the majority of people don't deadlift that much anyways.
Mhm.
How was I going to do that? I could have never connected those dots. It's easy to connect them looking backwards, but for me, I was like, okay, if I could do 135 pounds, that'd be amazing. I did that and I was like, maybe I could go a little bit more. And I just kept having healthy doubt about where my limitations were. And that's all it takes. You don't have to have this crazy Jocko Willink type mindset where you're just a hardcore Navy SEAL. You don't have to be that person. And you don't have to have these crazy tactics and rituals and stuff. Really just ask yourself, like, will I look back on this decision and be happy? That's it. Will this decision make me proud going forward? If I don't go to the gym, if I don't do the stuff I said I want to do, if I don't start that podcast, if I don't share that story, when I look back on this, will I be proud or not? And use that as a guiding principle for your actions. Stay disciplined, use that. They'll solve 90% of your issues.
Mm-hmm. What role were your social groups? Were you lucky enough to have people in your environment that were reinforcing of this, or did you have to kind of make some changes in terms of your environment to get the support you needed?
This is probably something I don't talk about enough, and it's something I would really like to start talking about more. I've always been kind of a lonely person in that sense of I've never been a big social person. I'm extremely introverted, and which is weird if you see all the stuff I do in like social media or any of my career. For a living, I speak with people, but there's a reason I love being on stage because it separates me from a crowd. I have never been one to have massive groups of friends. I've always been a one or two friend kind of person. And usually my friends aren't really into what I'm into, like the gym or business or anything like that. So a lot of it has been kind of lonely in that path of I know I need to do it. And there's some people that come and join sometimes randomly, then they go out of my life. And then there's new people that come in. But it's almost like those are the variables. I don't have any constants in terms of like social community. So when people see that, they're like, "Oh, you must have had an amazing network or an upbringing or anything." Like I grew up in the ghetto. You know, my parents had no money. We went to like churches to get food and stuff. Like I didn't grow up with a mentor. I didn't grow up on how to build a business or how to do any of this stuff. None of my family members were bodybuilders or powerlifters. It's harder when you don't have a network or support system, but we do have resources. And the biggest resource you have is being resourceful in itself to Google. You know, I always joke around like, oh, you could technically get a Harvard education just by looking up their syllabus, renting the books, and reading them yourself.
That's true.
You could, doesn't mean you want to. I know I don't want to, but if I wanted to, I could, you know. We have access. And whether you have access at home or you're unfortunate enough to not really have access at home and you can make it to a public library, there is access available to a lot of people. We argue that we definitely need more access and more communities, but resources are abundant. The taking advantage of those resources are not quite so abundant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a big fan of libraries. Ben Franklin, he was the guy. He started in America. I wish there was more libraries. Anyone listening, go to a library. I guarantee there's there's some that'll rent you computers that you can take home to work on your stuff.
Exactly. There's so much access to resources that are available. Yeah. So even in lower socioeconomic areas, there's so many educational materials that can be provided. And that's why I just encourage people. Self-education is such a huge part of my career and my growth. I got my degree in exercise science, but I don't use that. You know, I speak for a living now and I travel the country. My mom still probably doesn't even understand what I do for a living, you know? So I travel around the country and speak about like overcoming adversity or diversity and inclusion or change management. And I'm fortunate enough to love what I do and have impact, but all of it was building the career myself because I never knew a speaker. And if I asked you right now, you know, what motivational speakers do you personally know? Not many people know them. Or if they do, they're like, oh, they probably get paid like $5, you know, a month to speak at schools. So sometimes you got to create your own path.
Yeah. I know one now. His name's Chris.
Yeah, there you go. I got you.
I got one. Actually related to speaking, there was a story you told in one of your interviews where there's a moment where you did 30 of them, like 30 speaking gigs, and no one was paying you. And so you gave up and you went to like this place and the guy was like, go do what you're meant to do. And so you started again. But I'm curious, how did you go from 30 non-paying to, you know, now paying? Like, what was like, how did you shift it so you actually could get paid just in terms of speaking? If I remember the story right, like it was like 30 non-paying.
Yeah, I did a ton, like 30 or more free gigs. And the only difference between the non-paid gigs and the paid gigs was at one point I started asking for money. And people like, there's no way it was that. Literally. I had one person offer me an honorarium on the phone and I was like, what the what the hell is an honorarium? I'm Googling it, you know, and like it's like speaker fee. I'm like, oh yeah, just that's whatever the last speaker did. And he's like, okay, is $2,000? That's what he did. So is that okay? I'm like, yeah. I got off the phone and I like lost my mind because I'm like, $2,000 to speak. Like I used to get in trouble for speaking in class, and now this
Hmm.
person wants to pay me. Like this is wild. And then I was like, okay, maybe I should start asking for honorariums, you know? And then I started doing that, and people were like, yeah, we can do 1,000, we can do 2,000. I'm like, that's insane to get paid for like 60 minutes, 1,000, $2,000. I'm like, that's wild.
Hmm.
And then I did the same thing I did with the deadlift. Healthy doubt. What happens if I could do more? What happens if I could get paid more? I started seeing some speakers were making $5,000, $10,000. I'm like, 10,000? No way. But maybe. But no way. I'm like, that's not real. Over the course of the years, I built my business. I set myself up. What does a $5,000 speaker look like? What does a $7,500 speaker look like? What does a $50,000 speaker look like? How can I look like that? So I started doing more podcasts. I started getting on podcasts and doing news interviews and reaching out to PR people. And as I was making money, reinvesting in my business to get better equipment, better lights, and better videos. And I got to the point, this year I am that $10,000 speaker now. Like that's my normal fee. And it's so incredible to look back on that kid or that guy who wanted to work for a supplement store at $8 an hour, and he was told no because he had too much to offer. And then he stopped being free. He started seeing his value, you know?
Hmm.
So I feel like a lot of us end up doing that. We doubt our value, then we get a little taste of value and we slowly build it back up. But the whole time the value was there. It's just your inability to recognize it. If you offered someone $100 bill for $10, everyone would take that because they see the value in it. But it's if you don't, that's on you, you know? So it took me a while to really realize like what I'm doing, what you're doing, what people are doing is worth something, whether it's money, time, something. And I just started charging my value.
Hmm. I pictured you when you were describing it, of someone be like, "Oh, do you want an honorarium?" And you're just like saying, interesting," as you like.
I'm furiously, I'm talking on the phone. They were on speaker. I remember I was in Coral Springs, which is a little north of me, in my backyard, pacing. Literally, like I have one thumb. I'm like one thumb going in trying to Google, like, what the hell this honorarium is. And like, it was one of those moments like, yes, yes, yes. So that's really good. And just trying to divert the conversation until I could figure out what that meant. But yeah, it was definitely a moment. I'll never forget that conversation because that was the start of deciding that I was worth being paid for what I was doing.
Mhm. Is it like in some industries, if you know the nomenclature, like the phraseology, you can get through it? Did you need to know like honorarium to like get paid?
I
Was that like one of the cheats?
I think that's one of them is to know some of the phrasing,
Yeah.
to know some of the bigger stuff. Like as I moved my way through learning about speakers bureaus, learning about sending proposals instead of just emailing someone, hey, I charge $3,000. Like putting effort into like what you're gonna give so people see value. I think there's an element of sales in everything. There's an element of charisma. There's an element of relatability. So how do you listen to what you're saying? You're like, oh, I want to hire someone for a speaking fee for a speaking event. That's not what they really want. They don't want to hire a speaker for an event. What they truly want, and here is where I always like find out people's needs. They want to bring someone into this company that makes them look good. That's what they want. They want to bring someone in that makes them look good as the person planning the event. So, as a speaker, how can I make them look good? One, and how can I give them the confidence that I'm going to make them look good? It's the same thing with weight loss. No one hires a personal trainer to lose weight. No one does. And everyone's like, what do you mean? No one does. Because if I helped you lose 50 pounds, but you looked the same, would you be happy? No. Because you didn't want to lose the gravitational force. You wanted to look like you lost the weight. You wanted the look of the weight loss. But even more than that, I'm going to say that's a lie too. You don't want the look of the weight loss. You want the feel that you think the look of the weight loss will give you.
Mhm.
You want the feeling. That's the true motivator is the feeling of whether it's confidence, health, something. There's a feeling you've attached to an end goal. That's what most people want. And when I found that, I was like, okay, how can I serve that? Not what you're telling me, but what you're truly asking me. That kind of changed the game for me.
Is it like a questions roughly that you ask, or is it what you analyze after meeting them or in preparation of meeting them that lets you see that of what they actually want?
I think a lot of people, and in the beginning, I made mistakes. I learned from my mistakes. In the beginning, I would tell people what I do and what I offer.
Mm.
No one cares what you offer. They care what they get. And that might sound selfish, but it's true. So instead of me telling them about myself and how amazing I am, I would say, hey, what are you looking for? What do you need for this event to be successful? Describe a perfect event. You know, what's one thing or three things you want your audience members to walk away with? They just told me everything I need to build the best presentation possible. I learned that in the beginning, it was very easy for me to talk. Now it's much more effective, productive, and profitable to hear people talk and to listen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. You'd be surprised at how little you have to say to go about the world. It's actually really nice because I'm a bit of an introvert too. Yeah, so it's like, yeah, I just can just sit here. People want to. Yeah, they want people, especially in the environments you're talking about. They want you to be successful because then it makes them successful. So they're going to tell you what they want. Like most people do not hide what they want. They're very upfront about it.
They're very upfront, and honestly, I've talked to people at events where I barely say anything. They'll come to me after the talk and they're like, oh, they're talking to me and I'm like asking questions. I'm making eye contact, body language towards them, and I'm listening to them and I'm asking them about what they're saying. They leave and they're like, you were the nicest person I've ever met. You were so amazing. You're so great. And in my head, I'm like, what did I say? What did I say? I listened to you. I gave you my time and attention, and you think I'm amazing. And it's almost sad because so many people don't give their time and attention. So when you give that to someone, they think you're incredible. There's the science of likability or anything like that is to literally listen better, to be engaging. You don't have to be amazing. You have to be engaging. And I think that's what people think, like, oh, I've never done a TV show. People wouldn't like me like that. I'm not that social. Me neither. I hide in my house 24/7, but I listen to people when they talk. And as a podcaster, I'm sure you do the same. You give people like me a position to speak. We speak and you listen, ask questions, and people love that kind of stuff. That's why they love this, because it's like a true, authentic conversation from someone who's genuinely interested in what other people have to say for the purpose of your listeners. I think that's incredible.
Have you ever read the book Never Split the Difference? I think you'd love it.
Yes, I did.
Yes.
I have it right here on my wall somewhere.
I have it literally right next to me.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, they just came out with a masterclass. Some libraries give people free access to. I'm telling you guys, go to the library. They give you free access to masterclass, and I checked them all out. The masterclass is actually pretty good too.
That's incredible. I love that book. Phenomenal negotiation book. Yeah,
I recommend it to everyone. And the people I recommend it to, try not to say that they've read the book because they feel like someone's gonna know what they're doing. But like they've negotiated like $1 million deals from it. It's like, read it. It's great.
I promise. If you combine that book with something called the Like Switch, LIKE switch, it's by an FBI agent, and it's all about like body language and about communication to really get close with people. Those two things combined make you the most dangerous person socially and business sense. But it's cool because these are real resources, resources that you can get in the library, that you can learn how to be more social in certain situations that you need to or want to, and how to negotiate better life for yourself, whether it's business or personal mental health. It all is the same thing. I can sell you an object, a service, or an idea. All of that comes into play with negotiation and communication. And that's why I love being a communicator for a living. I get to help people with those three aspects of their life.
Yeah, I think something that I hear in all your interviews and what we're talking about today is like, it's not, it doesn't sound like you seek perfection and then speak. It sounds like in a lot of situations, like just in terms of myself as well, like I've noticed that people will think that they need like X before they can do Y, and they like build up like, I need to write the perfect email and it has to be perfect before I do something. But there's an element of like, if you just try it, like you just put yourself out there, like you kind of figure it out. Like I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people don't put themselves out, is that they think they're going to be rejected or they're going to fail or something, or like they haven't done enough to like do whatever. And I like a lot of your questions you ask yourself is like, what do y'all have to do to be good enough to do it? But I've noticed in a lot of situations, all you have to do is just try. Like one thing I used to do when I started writing emails to get people on the podcast, I'd write one email that I thought was good enough, and then I'd write the next one, and then I'd just tweak it a little bit, and I'd tweak it. And by like the 100th person I was emailing, each of them were different. Like I wasn't like carbon copy and everything, but by the end of it, it was like there's a really tight email, but the first person still liked it too.
Yeah.
So you just kind of like you experiment and you find it as you go. I am curious. Did you do any voice training? Like you have a really good voice. Did you do any
That's
training on
wild.
that?
I actually don't believe that I do, but that's also a personal limiting belief that most people have when they hear their voice. I'm definitely not a singer. But I've learned the power of tone and cadence, and those were learning tactics from speaking. So I did Toastmasters. That's like a free course you can do and join local groups and learn how to speak. I also watched a ton of YouTube videos on how professional speakers speak, how to remove filler words like, and how to speak with impact. And that comes from cadence and tone and rhythm. I'm more of a charismatic speaker, and I've learned how to do that just from being personable, which is weird because I'm not extroverted, but I am personable when I talk with people. So I think some of it is natural, some of it is built, where I've learned communication tactics on how to engage with people, but definitely voice wise, definitely no strategic work that I've done.
Okay, no, it sounds great. So I mean,
Oh,
if
that's awesome. That's
you know,
great.
don't mess with how it works, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, is there anything is there anything else that you do prepare for? Like after you're in the door, yeah, they're excited for you to come. What do you do to get yourself ready to speak on whatever you're going to speak on? Like, do you have like a slideshow that you do for yourself? Like, I mean, I'm kind of curious, like what you do to prepare yourself for speaking.
I love to be authentic in the moment. And when I prepare my talks, I maybe at most have like 10 bullet points, if that, in my notes. No slideshow. And I speak genuinely as it comes related to the topic that I'm doing. I love speaking in that sense. And the mentor I had a long time ago when I first started speaking, he said, a good speaker doesn't always have a prepared talk, but is always prepared to talk. And I love that because that's how I learned to speak from the heart and speak genuinely. And when I tell a story, it could be the same story that I've told, but I'm always in it and I'm always present. So being present is huge. Now, I will say, a lot of people are like, you've given hundreds of talks. There's no way you get nervous. I get nervous every damn time, because it's normal. But I convince myself that that nervousness is excitement because it's a very similar feeling. And I just say, I'm not nervous to do this talk. I can't fail because I'm giving value from my heart. How can you mess that up? What I stutter, what I mess up a word. I'm not trying to remember anything because I'm speaking genuinely. I don't get nervous when I'm having a conversation with someone about something that I know. So why would I do that the same way in front of people? More people doesn't change my message. I could speak to one person, I could speak to 10,000 people. It's the same delivery because I believe it.
Mm-hmm.
It's much easier to speak when you're coming from a place of authenticity and not trying to screw people over.
Yeah, it makes life much easier.
Yes.
So when you're in the moment, do you worry though? Like when you're talking to people, it goes away?
It completely goes away when I'm
Yeah.
speaking. I'd say my biggest worry would be going to like a party or a social event where people are like hanging out and I'm not speaking and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I could speak for 90 minutes, but you put me in a cocktail room and I'm like, I'm just going to go hang out by the snacks, So my specialty is speaking on a stage. That's where I'm most comfortable, whether it's a workshop or a keynote. I love that stuff. And I know that's where my true specialty is. Or where my weakness is trying to build the social small talk interactions. That's my harder part, but we all have strengths and weaknesses, And sometimes people are like, but you're a speaker. You should be good in any situation. I'm like, what? Don't put that weight on me, that expectation on me. I know what I'm good at and I know what I need to work on, and that's it.
Yeah. No, I'm the same way. Like if I'm in a social environment, I'm either really quiet or I'm like, so what do you think about the new tax policy?
Exactly. I'm like, do you like bread? I'm like, I don't know what to say. But if it's a genuine conversation with a smaller group, I can speak on things that I know, but I'm very hesitant to speak on anything I don't know because I don't know it. And I never want to come across as like a know-it-all. Yeah. I know a lot about the things I know about, and I'm quiet about the things I don't. And I think that's a good skill to have.
Yeah, and also the questioning nature. You can just ask people questions. It's like I already know everything I'm going to say. I don't know what they're going to say. I'm much more interested in that. That's exactly. Also part of the problem as well. It's like I'm kind of curious what Amy or whomever is around me is going to say.
Yeah,
I don't want to talk about my childhood stories. I already know what they are. Like, you know.
exactly. So it's much easier to ask questions in that case. And you ask them about their life, they want to talk. People want to speak. So you just position them to speak. And that's helped me a lot in social situations, is figuring out who they are, what they do, and it saves me in some situations.
Have you ever read anything by Carl Jung on terms of archetypes?
Carl Jung, he did the shadow self.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I did. I have one, I forgot what it's called, but it was when he was first talking about the shadow selves, and it was really interesting, really fascinating.
Yeah, I interview a lot of people and I talk to a lot of people. And I'm starting to like internally form like a series of, because like at a certain point, like there's not like everyone is like infinitely unique. Like there's a lot of like variation, but the people who do kind of fall into like archetypes, which is kind of interesting in terms of like, oh,
Definitely.
okay, like this is how you like to be spoken to, and then you can like
Yeah,
address it. Like it's very interesting that way.
I love
But
that though.
when you are speaking on stage, do you do the technique where you speak to one person, or do you speak to everybody?
So I pick maybe 3 or 4 people out of the
Okay.
audience, and those are my go-tos. I sometimes scan and still like engage, but I try and pick people who are relatively maintaining eye contact, because it is a genuine conversation. I'm not speaking to a group, I'm speaking to an individual multiple times.
Have you ever like seen someone just playing on their phone and just walked up to them and just stare them down until they paid attention,
I
just to
so
like get everyone's attention?
I've never, I can say like confidently, when I do my talks, I start a lot of my talks pretty explosively, so like I get their attention,
Good, yeah.
and I tend to keep people's attention. There was one event, this guy specifically, I remember, he looked like he was falling asleep, and I was like, what the fuck? Like, what? That's never happened to me. Like, what's going on? I found out he was plastered from the night before. He was just having a really rough time. So it made me feel better to find that out. But I try and maintain a communication so it's not a lecture.
Yeah.
I know what it was like being in school and having a teacher that you were like, oh my God, this is terrible. You're like watching the clock and stuff. But I also know what it's like to have a teacher that I was excited to see, because I was like, she makes this class so amazing.
Hmm.
What was the difference? Her communication style, you know? And that's what I try and emulate.
Makes sense. So the one thing I've noticed that you're really good, like I mentioned a couple times, at like having these great phraseologies, which I guess is like maybe like why you wrote a book, because you can put them all in one place in encapsulates in your whole life. I'm curious. Are there sections of the book that you still pull that walk with you as you go through your day?
So
And
there's stuff that I put in that book specifically because I use it regularly.
okay.
So it's not like I put it in the book and then I use it. I use it and I happen to put that in the book.
Hmm.
So that whole circle of concern versus influence thing, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. Basically, instead of focusing on what you're concerned with, focus on what you can influence. If you can't influence it, it's not your problem. And that is a daily thing where I have to put my mind through stuff. A lot of people, and I hope you're not going to be one of them, a lot of people ask me like, how did you overcome your struggle? Like, how did you overcome? And I'm like, guys, there is no finish line to mental health. There's no finish line to this stuff. Like, I still have my disability. How did I overcome it? Well, I'll tell you if it ever happens. It's a daily thing. I've learned to not let those like bad thoughts win the whole day. They might win small moments, but I still work on those. And those intrusive thoughts, we can't stop intrusive thoughts, but we can control them, and we can learn to domesticate emotion around feelings and understand that not all feelings are real. So I use a lot of those concepts in the book on a daily basis to make sure that I'm like grounded and not letting the shadow self or that kind of side of me win.
I think uh like adversity, getting over something, and death is very similar in terms of people are always like, how long until I get, like, if you ever lost a loved one, it's horrible, but like, how long until I got you feel cool, like you're okay with it? It's like you never really feel okay with it, you just get used to it. Like that's
That's
the
it.
thing. Yeah,
That's really what it is. And I did a post that went like super viral on Twitter, and I was talking about healing, and I was like, healing doesn't mean the problem doesn't exist anymore. It just means you're not controlled by it anymore. The problem is there. The issue is there. The pain or whatever was caused was there, but you learn to not be controlled by the pain when it comes up again. You lose someone, you lose an opportunity, you're hurt by something. The goal is not to erase memories or to erase happenings, it's to manage them. And I feel like that's not proper mental health, but that's optimal mental health.
it's interesting. I'm rereading Marcus Aurelius' The Meditations, and they're
One
just
of
like,
my favorite
yeah,
books, Stoicism, is what changed my life. So
yeah. there's an entire section where he's just talking about how like only think about what is necessary, and in every other situation, before you even think about actions that are necessary, just start thinking what is necessary. And I was going for a walk, and so I just started thinking, is this a necessary thought? Like, what am I doing?
It can
And
be a
it's like
little exhausting when you
this
try
is
to cut everything out,
yeah. It's like this I can see the value of it. I'm gonna do like 30% effectiveness, and then for the rest of the day, and see how that feels like.
Yeah.
It was a very different day. Like it's a very nice experiment in that way.
It's crazy because that narrative, internal narrative, we tell ourselves it's important. And then if it's important and we don't have it, we're already in stress. We're already suffering, because of the story we told ourselves and the severity of it. When in reality, if you can't do anything about it, it's not your problem. And if you can do something about it, it's not your problem, because then do it. Then you don't have a problem at all.
Mhm.
Either way, you don't have problems. And people are like, well, that's not true. No, it is. It might not be easy because you have to do work, but it is simple in concept. If you can solve a problem, you should solve it. And if you can't, it's not your problem to solve.
Do you I've noticed that people tend, when they get stuck in their heads, like if it was in reality, like the same concept was in reality, like they would be like, oh, that's wrong. Do you ever like do journaling or something to like get out the thoughts in your head into like a physical realm so you can like interact with it in a different way?
So I tried doing that, and my therapist yelled at me because it just became a to-do list.
Mm.
So she was like, write down everything you think in the morning. I'm like, I need to go get milk. I need to write talk. And she's like, that's not what I meant. For me, I think it's processing in my head and going through. And I use like this weird type system of like dealing with it in the moment. So I like kind of visualize like a stop sign when I have these racing, circular, or like spiraling thoughts. And I picture this big stop sign coming up in my face. And then I'm like, sometimes I use the Mel Robbins approach, the countdown from 5, which kind of tricks your brain to be present in the moment. Um, but I look at it, I'm like, can I do anything about it now? Is what I'm doing helping or hurting? That question is like, damn, it's hurting me, but it feels nice, but it hurts. It's almost weird, right? We like feel nice about making ourselves feel like shit,
Mm.
you know? Um, but then I have to bring myself down. Like, this is not something I can focus on now. I know it's my brain trying to protect me by saying, remember, we're scared of this. Don't get hurt. Don't do this. It's your brain trying to help, but sometimes that can be hurtful, in the long run. So I give myself permission to let things go a lot.
Mhm. Just in terms of like priorities in your life, this is a bit of a transition. Are you focusing like speaking is clearly a big thing in your life. How much is like business and other things? Like what are the like I guess the pillars of what's going on with you?
Speaking is definitely my main focus. My next step is to help other speakers become speakers, like as a profession. I see a lot of people speaking as a means to sell something,
Hmm.
and not enough people who want to become speakers, as the career itself, instead of a medium to move something. Not that that's a bad thing, but I think we need more stories and impact to help other people. So I want to help people become paid speakers so that they can do it for a living. That's my next step for next year. I also have like a protein bar company and I do that, but I would say my main focus is speaking and spin-offs from that, like consulting or social media around overcoming adversity. Everything is a spin-off around the 3 main topics that I talk about.
Makes sense. If the voice wasn't taken, you could, I could see you as like a very strong person with the voice underneath you for branding.
That'd be incredible. That'd be incredible.
Yeah, you have a good voice. I like
Love
it.
that. I
Yeah, if
love
you did
that.
like audiobooks or something, I'd enjoy it.
I'm
Um,
actually working on an audiobook of my book right now. So
you're using your own voice.
I am. Yeah. I'm big on that. Anytime I do an audiobook, I'm going to use my voice because it needs to be in my tone. It
Yeah.
needs to be even Ryan Holiday is one of my favorite authors, aside from Brianna Weiss, but she's my absolute favorite. But Ryan Holiday did a book and it was read by someone else and I hated it so much. But when it was his reading, I loved it because it was him.
Hmm.
I'm like, that's the guy I've seen on YouTube. That's his voice reading his message. And I just connected with it so much more. So I really love when it's in the author's voice.
Yeah, there's a couple by Neil Gaiman where he does his voice, and it's so much better
I love
than
it.
the other person. I don't think I can even remember the first one. I listened to the first like chapter of it. I was like, well, this is nice. And then
I can't do it though. Yeah, it's so weird to me. Like even Brene Brown or Vanessa Van Edwards, love her. I love their voices, and they're not perfect voice actors, which makes it almost better. That's what I like.
Yeah, the imperfections of it,
Yeah.
the highs and the lows. Like it's like a conversation like you've been talking about.
It doesn't sound like a movie reading where it's like back in the day, like some deep, like, I don't want that. I don't want Morgan Freeman might be a little cool, but like, I really want to know the person too. I feel more connected with it.
Yeah, makes sense. The well, just touch on your business real quick. What's like you're like the chief marketing guy, right? Or what's your
Yes.
role? Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
okay.
the co-owner and the CMO.
Have you guys thought about like plant based in terms of your bars? I have not eaten them, so
Yeah.
if they already are, I'm sorry, but
We have one plant-based bar. It's our vegan bar, and we're reformulating it right now. We ended up selling out of all our products, so we're out of stock for like 3 months, especially because of supply chain issues and all the thing that's been going on in the world. But we restock Monday, well, coming up in a few days, and um, we are developing a second vegan plant-based bar. All our bars are made with like organic nut butters, but we use grass-fed whey isolate. So for our vegan or plant-based people, they have one bar right now that they can use, and we're hopefully adding another bar in the next few months.
makes sense. Is there have you been following at all like what this Mr. Beast guy's been doing? There's a YouTube guy. His name's Mr. Beast. He made
Yeah,
like a bar. Have you been following that at all?
I have not seen. I didn't know he had a bar.
Yeah, he has he started a candy bar thing. He just got in Walmart.
That's
I've been
cool.
following it because it's like this is really interesting how he's doing this. And so
That's awesome.
I was gonna ask you your opinion of it, but if you don't know, it's fine.
Oh, that's
I'll link you
sweet.
to it
I'm gonna
later.
check that out as soon as I'm done with this. That's really cool.
Yeah, how he's doing is very compelling. I like it. Like even I've gone on my way. And it's like I'm buying one on
That's
like this
awesome.
weekend. Yeah, um, but have you onshored like in terms of like simplifying your supply chain to like are you bringing it to like a more non to distributed
So
place?
we don't have a big answer for that yet. We're still importing, but we're importing at higher amounts of
Mm.
ingredients. So everything is formulated like and finalized stateside. It's local to us. So we get to go to the manufacturers and make sure everything is like the right process. All of our ingredients are like natural and healthy. But it is tough because of cost, and to compete in this market, it has to be affordable to the consumer, but the margins on ingredients has been tougher and tougher. So business has been a very big game of adaptation and figuring out ways to still maintain your brand identity and value without caving to the prices that are increasing drastically.
Yeah. It This is kind of like a weird way to think of this question, but what made you think that you had something unique to go into a market that's so saturated? Like what made you what gave you that confidence?
I love the idea of saturated markets. A lot of people get afraid of saturated markets. They see, oh, that market's saturated, so it won't work. No market is too saturated for a good product. When markets are saturated, it usually means that they're saturated with bad products. That's the reality. Tons of people are doing it, but we can't say tons of people are amazing. We can't say tons of people are number one or number 10. There's a very shallow depth of field for people who are successful in a saturated market. And it's usually because most people just want to hop into the market and don't do it to their most effective way, or they don't know who their customer is. They're just trying to make money. One, we have an incredible story to position ourselves to establish trust with the community. And if you notice, I'm not even talking about the product yet because people have to trust. Community is everything, when it comes to creating some sort of sustainable culture or long-term like relationship. When we created our product, we wanted to use healthy ingredients. We wanted it to be small enough because a lot of people who do protein bars, they end up eating half of it, folding it in their purse or gym bag, and it melts. And, you have this bar that's like massive and you're only going to eat half of it. We didn't want that. We wanted something that people could eat quickly on the go. And we didn't want to sacrifice taste for health or vice versa. A lot of protein bars taste like a punishment. It's a reality. They're either so healthy and amazing, but they taste terrible, or they're pretty good, but their health profile or their macros are just awful. We're like, there has to be an answer for this. There has to be some sort of in between. And we wanted to create dessert flavor bars because if we could get someone to replace one candy bar with something like this, we're doing our job. So all of that kind of came together with my co-owner being a yacht chef, and we found a way to make healthy taste good.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
just as a quick aside, because I don't. What is a macro and why is it
Macro.
important?
So when I say macro, I mean macronutrients, and that's the main three nutrients that determine calories. So all calories come from three main nutrients: proteins, carbs, and fats.
Okay,
So if you look at the back of any nutrition label, you can figure out the calories based on the proteins, carbs, and fats.
that's interesting. I'm gonna do that after this call.
Yeah. So basically, carbs have 4 calories per gram, protein has 4 calories per gram, and fat has 9 calories per gram, which
That's
is
neat.
why a lot of people were scared of fat, not because it's fattening, but it just has the highest density of calories. Doesn't mean it's bad, it just means more dense. So we created a balanced nutrient profile so that it could help people fill up, but at the same time, fill up with the right stuff.
Is have you guys considered or played around with the like the cell agriculture type stuff where like they build it in a lab, they grow it in a lab, like
I
the
have not. That's really cool, though. That sounds fascinating.
yes. I have a friend, Cell Agri. Everyone, Ahmed, I mentioned to you, $2. But I
Oh,
was just
yeah.
talking to him yesterday. There's a bunch of conferences on this where they're growing, uh, the like if you ever heard of the Impossible Burger that's at Burger
Yeah.
King,
Yeah.
yeah, it tastes just like a normal burger. That one's plant based. A lot of them say they're Cell Ag where they can grow in a petri dish. It's not a petri dish. It's like actually it's really interesting. Um, to grow it, you ever seen like a brewery
Yeah.
like those
Yeah.
giant metal things? They make them in that and like a system like that and it comes out well some of them do in terms of like the one of them that I'm thinking of it is made like that so you actually can like make it like microbrewery but there's a
That's
lot going on
awesome.
yeah I'll send you a link to it
Yeah.
but
Send me that. That sounds fascinating.
yeah well the neat thing is this is kind of related there's like a guy who's making I think he's making elephant I think he's making elephant or whale he's making like something fun he's in Australia but I was just wondering if you could is there anything that you've always wanted to eat that you haven't, or like there's like a secret thing that you love to eat? Since we're talking about food, and I love cooking or making things that are interesting, um, is there? Do you have like a secret guilty pleasure that most people like? If it's just like a 20-ounce steak, that's great too.
I'm known as the donut guy.
Okay,
I am obsessed with donuts. I have a donut tattoo on my leg with an insulin pump in it. I anytime I travel, I look for, I would say, three main things when I travel around the country. I look for donuts, I look for birria tacos, and I look for a good old fashioned. Those are the three things when I travel around. If I can find those, I will always have those. So I'm obsessed with birria tacos. I love all kinds of food. I cook as well, but birria tacos have been like my probably unknown obsession.
what is a birria taco?
Birria is a specific Mexican type red sauce,
Okay,
and they kind of dip it in the quesadilla, and then they fry the quesadilla with cheese and like shredded pork, and then you use that
that sounds good.
birria sauce. It's my mouth is watering. I'm
Yeah,
terrible. But if you can experience birria tacos are BIRRIA, they have changed my life. They're incredible.
if you're ever in the Midwest or like if you do speaking in Iowa City, there's Hertz Donuts that
Hertz donuts.
yes, I have had them. They're delicious. There's also Scratch cupcakes, which is they're not donuts, but they're pretty good too.
I don't discriminate against baked goods. I love baked goods. But I will say we have Salty Donut down here in Miami and Wynwood, and it's really incredible. But the best donut place I've ever had in my life, it's a tie between Sidecar Donuts in Los Angeles and the Donut Bar in Las Vegas. Those two places, oh, I'm obsessed, obsessed.
I'll have to check them out. I haven't been to
Yeah.
either of those cities, and I'm planning like a U.S. tour, so I'll check them out when I go
I
there.
can promise you, like, we can connect offline and I'll show you some spots, some places I've been that have such good food. I can't wait to go back.
Yeah. If you're ever in Madison as well, I can suggest some things to you.
Awesome.
Just in terms of nutrition, I was reading these articles on how if you have the right nutrition and diet and fitness. I don't know why I'm saying like different ways to say nutrition, but you can like I don't know if that's the right word, but like cure diabetes. And so I'm wondering if like it was like 60% effective in terms of like type 1 diabetes or type 2. And I was wondering in terms of uh, like the health aspect of what you've made, does it follow principles like that you've seen that to be effective in terms of like what people should be eating? Like, is your stuff like diabetes friendly? I guess is like a much more concise way of saying that sense.
So when I first started speaking, the majority of my talks were in the diabetes space. So doing diabetes education was big. And we'll kind of break down what you just said. Type 1 is an autoimmune disease that used to just happen at birth, and now it happens anywhere. I got diagnosed at 19.
Hmm.
Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease, and there have been 0 autoimmune diseases that have been cured in the history of mankind. There is no possible way to cure an autoimmune disease. We do not have that yet. Once one is cured, tons of them will be cured, but we have not found a way to cure type 1 or any autoimmune disease for that matter. So that's out of the running. When it comes to curing type 2 diabetes, there's a few things on that. I'd say probably about 60% of type 2 diabetics are lifestyle related factors where their pancreas cannot keep up with the need for insulin production. 40% are genetically predisposed to not producing enough insulin. Those 40% will never be able to cure their type 2 diabetes. 60%, we can maybe potentially cure them, but more so goes into like remission, so to speak. Because if you're prone to having your beta cells cut off production of insulin, you might always be prone to that. A diet might help maintain that, but it's more treating instead of curing in a better way to look at that. So when you look at people like the Jocelyn Diabetes Center, they're big on trying to re-educate the public and thinking you can't just cure things outright like that. For some people, they'll never need insulin or pills again if they change their diet. Some people might. Mm-hmm. So I never want to give false hope to people, but I will say that diet and exercise can solve a majority of issues, especially in the type 2 community.
Okay. Are there things that people should be doing in particular that are type 2?
In general, so it depends on type 1 or type 2. But in general, I think the biggest issue comes from excessive caloric consumption. Because there was a Kansas State nutrition professor who did a study where he ate Twinkies and protein shakes for like 60 days. He lost like 30 pounds and improved his cholesterol and metabolic profile because he was in a caloric deficit. Obviously, that's not good. But what he wanted to show was if you're eating less than you need, you're going to be a lot healthier than eating more than what you need, even in a healthy way. So I think the majority of the issue comes down to portion control and caloric issues. Then it comes to like, okay, if your blood sugar is going extremely high, you need to stop eating pasta and breads and stuff that spikes it, and you need to manage it a little bit better. But always obviously talk to your doctor and healthcare team. Controlling your diet doesn't mean avoiding foods that are delicious. It means controlling the portions of all foods. So I don't eat what's considered diabetic friendly because I don't even agree with that philosophy. I think all food is friendly within portion limits, you know?
Yeah. My technique is to like be small on breakfast and lunch. And then like I kind of can eat what I want for dinner. And that seems to work out.
Literally budgeting. So when I explain nutrition to people, especially calories, I'm like, think about it as $50 for the day. Do you want to spend 45 tonight? If so, you can only spend 5 in the morning. Do you want to spend $5 every hour? Absolutely, no problem. But guess what? Once that $50 is spent, it's spent. You can't spend any more. There's no debt. So I give people the freedom of flexibility. How do you want to spend this $50? You want to have a pizza at 9 a.m.? Great. Your $50 is spent, and the rest of the day you can't eat.
Yeah.
You're going to learn. And then you're going to be like, oh, damn, I didn't like that. Or guess what? The other way around, it's 9 p.m. and you only spent $2. You have to spend 48 more. You have to eat. But I only want to eat when I'm hungry. Well, when you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated. You know, you don't only work when you want to work. You work all the time. Eating is not just of joy and pleasure. It's of necessity. And that goes for both eating too much and not enough.
Are there things that you see that people normally get wrong? And that's one of the things that's very confusing for people that I listen to. Is like they don't know what to listen to or what to do. And my answer is just like experiment a lot with yourself and figure it out. But I'm just kind of curious for someone who's like very good with fitness. Are there things that you notice, like the deficit thing, that people typically get wrong in terms of what they're thinking?
Yeah. So all diets that are successful share one common principle, and that's caloric control. That's what all common diets have if they're successful. So whether it's high carb, low carb, keto, paleo, anything, they all have the same principle of caloric control. You know, people are like, no, that's not true. I cut out bread and I lost weight. You cut out bread. Bread has calories. You lost weight. You lost weight because you cut out calories. It's literally science. That's how this works. It's science. Weight loss is not magic. It's not a fad. They're like, oh, I switched to keto and I lost so much weight. Well, that's because you can only eat so much fatty foods because it's very satiating, and you cut out all carbs, which is calories. So you cut out calories. Like, oh, I eat paleo, so I only eat like natural foods and I cut out. What'd you cut out? Again, cut out calories. There it is.
Yeah.
All successful diets share the same principle. So don't get discouraged by what diet you should do. Start tracking what you're currently doing right now. And if what you're doing is causing you to gain weight, we know that we just need to do some less of that. So eat slightly less. And if you start losing weight, great. And then if you plateau, maybe eat slightly less. And then obviously, eventually, I think it's a good idea to work with someone who knows nutrition, whether it's someone like myself. I don't really do that anymore, but a registered dietitian or anything. So you can learn the right way to do it. If your car breaks down, most people go to a mechanic, you know?
Yeah.
If you're sick, most people go to a doctor. But for some damn reason, when you want to lose weight, you're like, I could do this myself. Why do we do that? Why not learn and skip all of the pain? Learn from a person who knows it really well and not just the person at LA Fitness or a crappy gym in your hometown. Maybe do a little research and find who you need to talk to. A 1 hour conversation with someone who knows what they're doing is going to save you a year's worth of pain through dieting and only eating tuna and applesauce.
That sounds horrible. I don't know
It's
if
pretty
is
awful.
that, is that a real diet? Tuna
It
and
is.
applesauce?
There is
Oh,
quite a few
wow.
diets that they're so restrictive. The biggest advice I could give for anyone who wants to start a fitness journey is don't get obsessed with the big end goal. Running an ultra marathon starts with one step, the same way getting to your upstairs, living room is one step. Everything requires one step. Just take the step and then take the next one. That's it. Like, it's the first step. That's all you need to do. Don't be obsessed with, I have to do so much, paralysis by analysis. I have to do so much that I'm in doing nothing. Go to the gym and walk on the treadmill for 15 minutes. Do that again, maybe 1 or 2 more times that week, and then high five yourself. Cut out the candy and the soda 1 day a week, then 2, then 3. Drink a little bit more water every day. Little steps, compound effect of little steps help. Instead of saying, I can only eat boiled chicken and broccoli and brown rice, even though I hate all 3 of those things, I'm going to go to the gym 7 days a week for 2 hours. I have 2 personal trainers. You're going to burn out. I would rather you be 80% on track for a year rather than 100% on track for a week.
Yeah. Something I will add, especially when you're going to see a doctor, is something I found very, very effective. Is if you have like a chart or something that you've been like trying, especially if it's not working out, you can kind of show what you've been doing to the doctor, and it's like even if it's like written down on a sheet of paper or a Google Doc. Like, I do that with all my doctors, and I see doctors a lot, and they'll literally look at it and like, okay, I know exactly where you can, you take like a 40-minute, like, did you try this? Did you try? Let me poke you a couple more times, run some blood, and then they like, I've had a doctor come in from like come in after reading it. And it's like, I know exactly what's wrong, and this is what we're gonna do. And normally it'd be like a 2-hour conversation, and and maybe you get somewhere where it's good. So if you can go like try a bunch of stuff, like bring it to the doctors, use their brain. They don't. Their job is to help, but sometimes you got to help them help you. I think it's like a good thing.
Their specialty is not necessarily diet, so you can see what help they can give. But I highly suggest save up a little bit and consult with a registered dietitian one time. Show them what you're doing, just like you're saying. Show them what you're doing. They're like, okay, you're a little deficient in this nutrient, and this calorie amount is a little too low for you, so we need to switch that. Now you know exactly what to do by someone who specializes in that. You wouldn't go to like someone who has a car to fix your car. You go to the person who fixes cars. So I think it's really important to know that, like, if you don't know enough to solve the problem, like, skip all of the hardship of trying to learn. If you had to have brain surgery, you wouldn't learn how to have brain surgery. You wouldn't learn how to do brain surgery. You would literally go to someone who learned how to do it a long time ago, So don't be obsessed with trying to do everything yourself. You're not a one-man army or one-woman army,
Yeah. So I know we're getting close to the end, so I'm going to give us our last couple of questions on this and have some rapid fire ones.
Cool.
In terms of peak performance, I know this is something you talked about a lot. I'm curious. I think peak performance, in my opinion, is a lot mental than it is physical in terms of like being able to do it. Are there, and we kind of been talking about this a little bit throughout, but are there things that you do to keep yourself mentally strong that you've noticed through your journey that you recommend to other people, I guess? Like,
I mean, I think it's important to find an ideology that you can align with. Like we were talking about earlier, Stoicism, that created a foundation. Um, who would be able to run faster? The person who starts on hard ground or the person who starts on soft sand? That foundation is super pivotal to being able to start, let alone keep going. Knowing that stoic philosophies help the way I manage stress and like emotional disarray gives me a position of strength to start from. So when I say read more, I hate the idea of it being cliche and like read a book, like skim through it. Honestly, find the summaries of books and go through that. Watch videos on YouTube where you're like, not just motivational rah stuff. That might be your thing. That's great if it is. For me, it's not personally. And I found that out. I don't like motivational kill it, go, ooh, yeah. Some people love that shit. I don't. I like to hear someone say, okay, focus on what you can control and not what you can't. And then I sit down and I'm like, damn, that's real. That's true. Okay, can I control this? No. Okay, what can I do? Focus on that. Because before I was everywhere and I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? What if? That narrowed my focus. And I feel like peak performance gets dialed down to pinpoint precision in action. And when you can pinpoint that mentally, you can pinpoint it a lot better physically, you know?
A question I ask myself, which is similar to some questions that you ask yourself as well, is like, is the thought I'm having now going to be important in 6 months?
Yeah.
Am I just like imagining scenarios? And it's like,
Yeah.
no, this isn't going to matter at all. Like, this is probably isn't going to happen. And then I stop the negative cycle I was on, and then it'll start back in 5 minutes. It's like, oh, then I notice it, and then it comes back maybe 10 minutes, and then over time, you slowly you build yourself noticing that you're doing that, and it
It's
helps.
effort.
Yeah.
It's so mental mental fortitude sounds super cheesy. The ability to domesticate thoughts or control thoughts or feelings is a skill. And any skill needs to be practiced, built, and to be honest, any skill starts with being really crappy at it. You know, when I first started recording videos, I had no clue what I was doing. And it took me a long time to upgrade my system, my processes, to learn, to practice, you know? Same thing with speaking. You can watch all of the videos on YouTube you want about speaking, but to be a good speaker, you have to speak. You have to practice speaking. You have to practice sucking, and you have to practice getting better. But if you don't do it, it'll never get better. So just reading, just listening about being healthy, just doing those things isn't enough. You have to actively be in it, sit with it, and have that thought come up and manage it, and then do it again over and over and over. Because a year from now is going to be a year from now, no matter what. You're either going to be better at what you've been practicing, or you're going to be right where you want to, right where you don't want to be again a year from now. And the difference is if you decide to put in the work moment by moment, day by day, you know?
Yeah. I think sometimes I feel like people are afraid to be alone with themselves. That it's like they keep themselves activated with the phones or anything around them just so they can never like be unstimulated. So they just don't want to sit alone in a room and think about what they're doing, or just like
Stimulation
exit.
can be
Yeah,
avoidance for sure.
yeah,
Stimulation can definitely be avoidance, but it can also be habit too.
yeah,
So it's hard when it's both. If you have a habit of avoidance, that takes effort to break. And when you're breaking habits, it's already uncomfortable. But when you're breaking habits that also make you uncomfortable on top of the habit you're breaking, it takes extra effort. And we have to learn that being uncomfortable temporarily is a part of the process of growth in any aspect of life. We have to be willing to sit with it, not run from it.
yeah. Okay. Uh, these are going to be very choppy in terms of transitions. I have my one question on the Titan Games TV show. Um, you obviously trained a lot for it, and you had a lot of fun. You know, weirdly enough, I actually remember seeing you on TV,
Oh, that's
and
wild.
yeah, I was rewatching. I was like, Aim and I watched this when he was
That's
going up. I was
crazy.
like, this guy's great. And so
That's crazy.
yeah, I was like, what a small world. But I'm curious. In terms of your training, when you look back on it, is there anything you think you could have done to improve your odds of doing better? And I wrote down like maybe doing yoga or something, so you'd be more flexible or something. But I'm curious. How would you improve your performance? Like, how would you train to make yourself better in
I
that
think
situation?
there's definitely stuff I could have trained for more. Like one, climbing would have been more, would be relevant. I was just excited to be on that show. I had no clue what to expect. None of us did. Um, I think I could have built like more cardio capacity. We didn't have too much time to train, to be honest. We only had like a month or two to train. And I'm a powerlifter. I lift heavyweight one time and then I take a break. So
Hmm.
that was very different for me. The situation that I was in, I was against someone who's a professional climber, and that was harder for me as a person with a disability to climb. But I think I fully won the mission that I had, was sharing the message
Yeah.
behind hiding and stopping hiding. So that's why I was so happy after that. I was like, I did it. And I lost, but I got to share my message, and they shared my message even though I lost. And I was the only person to lose and have that message shared. So I was like, I won, you know?
Hmm.
And it's crazy because there's some people that were on that show that did very well that are no longer doing well because they didn't, their mission stopped at the obstacle and not at the message. And that's what I try and encourage people to, don't make your finish line be superficial. There's a lot more that we can give than what we do, you know? And I think it's really important to know what's the long-term mission.
Yeah, there's a new TV series called Sandman, which is based on Neil Gaiman's. It's a really great comic book, but it's a really good Netflix series. And they have an episode. I'm gonna spoil a little bit. People don't beat me up. Where he had like a mission to recover some things and get back what he lost. And there's an entire episode him just being dour because he met his objective and he didn't know what to do with himself anymore. And so like
I can
literally,
I can add to that though, because I when I hit my goals, like I hit my big deadlift, I competed in bodybuilding last year and I ended up winning, and I was like, that was my lifelong goal. And then I went through this like phase of depression because I was like, oh my God, I hit my goals. I never thought I would do that. And I got to a point where I was like, what do I do? I've literally accomplished this, all the stuff that I said I wanted to. And it kind of sucked in a weird way. It was like depressing. It was like, what the hell? But then I had to reset new goals and like, restart and all that. But it's a weird position to be in, but it's nice looking back. It's hard. It's a different kind of hard.
yeah. Well, it was interesting in the episode. His sister Death came to help him get out of it. So it's very interesting in a stoic way that
It
Death
is.
is what.
I
Yeah.
love that. It's almost the
Yeah.
idea of like dying, your former self dying, but you completed, but maybe death is winning. Like we could get into a whole morbid
The,
conversation about that. But
it's very interesting because
what is
like
it called? The show
Sandman. It's
Sandman.
really
Okay,
good. Yeah. I mean
awesome.
the
That
first
sounds fascinating.
it's really good. I love the graphic novel as well. But yeah, that episode's my favorite. Like, I'll rewatch that anytime because
That's awesome.
you go through basically like an episode of like the Death going and doing her job of like reaping people, and it's like it's so sad. Like there's a moment where we walk in to see like a family doing something, and my wife's like, "They're gonna kill the baby, aren't they?" It's like,
Oh no!
yes,
Oh no!
yes.
It's one of those shows.
Yeah, yeah.
One of those.
They don't pull their punches. It's very good. I recommend it.
Amazing.
But it talks about some of the things we were talking about as well. If people want to have like a fun version of what we're saying, even though that's not all that
Yeah.
fun. So speaking about speaking, you want to help other speakers speak or become as a profession as their number one thing, and you want to do that next year, which is in a couple of years, a couple of months. Uh, how how will you do that? How will you help people?
So I have another mentor that I work with that we're planning to potentially go into business together doing this and putting a course out there for people to work with us directly on how to set up your business, how to earn your first $5,000, $10,000 as a speaker, whether that's the full year amount or a specific talk amount. There's principles that you need to do that I wish I could have taught my former speaker self 5 years ago on exactly what to do to become a paid speaker and how to build yourself a business around providing impact to people. So it's going to be a step-by-step course on everything from setting up your business to the fundamentals that you need to do to building your talk and then actually getting hired to speak.
Is there in a meta way, if you were like sitting back and there was someone out here listening to us, um, and you could just like make the speaker, any speaker you want. What is this? What is a topic you've always wanted to hear about? Like if you could have like a class couple of speakers in front of you, what is the topic that you've never heard anyone speak about that you'd love someone to speak about? And maybe someone listening is like, hey, I'm a nerd on that, and they can come
So
talk to you.
Kurt Vonnegut, I believe he passed away, but he did a talk about the shapes of stories. And I've been obsessed with that. Obsessed with the idea that stories are shapes.
Yeah.
You can write the shape of Harry Potter the same way you can write the shape of Star Wars or Cinderella. They all have different shapes and different value points in a shape format. So I love the psychology behind storytelling, and I love anyone who speaks on that, whether it's Vanessa Van Edwards, Kurt Vonnegut. There's a few different people who speak on it, but I would love to hear more of that. I'm fascinated with psychology of communication.
Have you looked at like the Hero of a thousand
Here, Thousand
faces?
Faces.
Yeah,
Yep. Yeah, I have that in my
yeah.
yeah.
It's a little
Uh,
dry, but
it's
it's
dry,
fun
but
too.
it's good information. It's just it's hard to get through sometimes. Good
Yeah,
for long drives. Good for long
yeah.
drives.
Well, in terms of audio, it was originally a lecture, so you can just watch lecture. I
Oh, that's
think they
cool.
still have it up there. Yeah, I
That's
think it was.
really cool.
I think I was watching on YouTube, so you can even get it free. Like YouTube
That's
is so
awesome.
great.
Yeah.
So then, when will people be able to access this? Like, is it like
I
Q?
can't confirm, but I could definitely say the goal is to have it by like beginning of Q2 next year.
Okay, so
Yeah.
pretty
And
soon.
anyone can reach out to me in terms of like Instagram if they have questions about wanting to be a speaker or even considering it, realizing that it can be a very high paying profession. Some people care about the money. I care about most the impact, and it's so much, it's fulfilling. So that's one of the scariest questions to ask people is like, hey, are you fulfilled in your life? That's a terrifying question to get. And it's a terrifying question answer to hear because if they're not, it's sad. Like I feel like everyone wants to be fulfilled and there are things we can do. Some people I truly believe are meant to be storytellers and I want to help those people. Now, if I can also help those people become six-figure speakers, that's incredible. And that would be a huge goal because financial freedom on top of impact and storytelling, to me as a speaker, that's the ultimate life, and that's what I want to help people with.
And storytelling is like like storytelling and being like a scientist or things that I think are just inherently human. Like if you imagine this 10,000 or more years ago, we were just all sitting around a campfire telling stories, and there was like a
Yeah,
person, like a bard, who would just like Homer. Apparently, was an audible story that was told that was eventually written down, and we figured that out based on like how it's structured. It's written in a way for someone to remember and speak it. So
that's
it's just
incredible.
it's very interesting to see like, which is just to say like storytelling is just like innately human, and
everyone
I
is
also
this,
agree.
everyone is a
Yeah.
storyteller. We tell I think it was like 5 to 10 stories a day on average. You tell a story of what happened to you earlier, what happened to you in a former like time in your life. You've told many stories on this podcast already. Everyone tells stories, so everyone has the ability to be a storyteller. Now the question is what's the message behind it and how can that help other people? So that's what I want to help people uncover.
Okay. Sweet. So you've been interviewed by a number of people. If you could go back and flip the script so that you were interviewing them, is there like of the people you've met, like something you wanted to ask them? Like if you could be the interviewer and be like, oh, now you have to answer my questions.
So the first person that pops up that if he listens to this, he would probably laugh. There's a guy named Steve Sims. Do you know who he is?
No.
He made a book called Bluefishing, and he basically provides connections for people. Say you're like, I want Mariah Carey to sing a song to me while I'm eating Church's chicken. He would make that happen. He is
Okay.
a luxury person who makes things happen, obviously for a price, but he makes things happen. And I didn't know who he was when he reached out to me. He is very famous. He reached out to me and interviewed me on his podcast. And I just had a normal talk with him. And I was like, oh, that was really cool. And he offered, he's like, oh, if you ever want to connect me, I'm like, oh, yeah, man, of course, of course. Like a month go by and I see him at like one of these big like conventions on social media. And I'm just like, wait, I know that guy. He was that little guy who interviewed me. And I'm like, oh my God, he is big. He's like super famous and like he has so much information. And I was like, damn, I really let that go. If I could go back, I would flip the script and I would interview him. And I would love to find out more about his life. And I'm sure
Mhm.
I could if I reached out to him. But one of those funny cases where he was so down to earth that I had no clue his status.
Yeah. I, I think most people who are actually quite large in a metaphorical way are, they don't really feel the need to show it off. They just
I
kind of go about
love
their
that
lives.
though.
Yeah.
It was great because same thing with The Rock when I met him. Like it's a natural conversation like this. And then they leave and you're like, oh, wait, that person was like a big deal in their space. So it was pretty cool, but definitely kind of a funny moment.
Yeah. Um, so on your LinkedIn, one of the things that it said that you like to talk about is how diversity without inclusion is a scam. And so I just wanted, I know we don't have that much time, but I was just kind of
Yeah.
curious. What did you mean by that?
To wrap that up, just having a diverse culture, whether it's a
Okay.
workplace culture or friends, just being diverse without actually including them is like inviting them to the dance, but never actually inviting them to dance.
Oh, that's sad. Yeah. Okay. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
So
Yeah.
that drives me nuts. When I mean, it happens to me all the time as a person with a disability. They're like, oh, we want to include you in this commercial. I'm like, oh, why? Because I have a disability. Then they have another person who's black, another person who's a woman, another person who's gay, and I'm like, oh, you're really just checking all the boxes, huh? Is that real inclusion, or is that just diversity as a divisive way to show differences? And that's, to me, true inclusion is removing diversity because it's naturally done. So
Yeah.
that's the goal, is to remove diversity and inclusion in general, because if everyone is inclusive, we don't have to talk about being inclusive. It's just
Mm,
natural. It's normal.
that makes sense. And do you have a second favorite tattoo? I know
I
you have a bunch.
just got this one, this eye tattoo,
There's two
uh,
eyes there.
two irises. Yeah, I just got this one like a week ago, and it was like 10 hours straight. It was awful, but it was great. I love art. So I have Edgar Allan Poe on my forearm. That's like probably one of my favorites. But I also have Hercules and the 12 Tribulations. A lot of it was related to overcoming adversity, or I loved Gothic Romanticism era writing.
Hmm.
A lot of the art I have is dark, which is funny because I'm very charismatic, like kind of light person. But the art I get is like aggressive.
Yeah, you might like the book. You probably read this, but A Man's Search for Meaning. It's very dark, but it's very
Frankel. It is very
yes.
dark, but it's incredible in terms of like processing perspectives and internal narratives, which is a lot of what I talk about.
Yeah. What is a problem you have that you'd love people's help with?
A problem that I have that I would love people's help with. I would say organization. Organization. That is probably, I am a very creative, chaotic person. I thrive in chaos. I would love to not. I would love to develop strategies for organization as someone who is very creative. That would be a very good help to me.
Okay. Is there a specific thing that you are struggling with in that
Creating a
regard?
system,
Okay.
having some sort of life system, because I don't have a regular 9 to 5. I randomly work. Sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's very little. So I need an adaptable system that doesn't feel like jail, but also makes me productive.
Hmm.
Because a lot of people will see the stuff that I've done and it seems like amazing, but I know there's so much more that I could and should do that I let go of because of a lack of organization. And that's one of my things I want to work on.
Sweet. Is there a question you have that is unanswered, which is not the previous one, that someone listening could answer for you? It could, the one I always used to give was like, if the Big Bang did not happen, what would be here without it?
Okay, so like a question that I don't have answered that someone could possibly answer.
Yes, my bad.
Um, does everything happen for a reason, or do we just make the reason up?
Hmm.
That's a big one, because for the longest time I believed nothing happens for a reason, because kids who are 3 years old with cancer die. You can't tell me there's a reason unless it's to selfishly improve your life in a motivating way, which is not right.
Yeah.
You know, does everything happen for a reason, or as humans do we believe in this full circle theory of we need to provide reason for completion?
Hmm. It's
Big
interesting. Yeah.
question. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there we've been talking about books this entire time. Are there go-to books that you recommend to people?
Yes. Okay. First one. Boom. 100%. 101 essays that'll change the way you think by Brianna Weiss. She is my favorite author. It was Ryan Holiday. Now he is number two because that book is a game changer. She also has The Mountain Is You, which was incredible. Um, Ryan Holiday, The Obstacle is the Way. That book changed everything for me into Stoic philosophy. The Like Switch, which we talked about earlier, by this FBI agent. And was there another one? I have a ton of books here, but I think those are the ones that really like stand out to me.
A book that I recommend to you based on your love of story is Save the Cat, and there's a bunch of them, but there's one on uh, screenplay writing that's really good. And they talk
If you
about
could
like,
send me all of your story recommendations, I would love that.
yes,
Just
I'll make a
text me
note.
or email me. Yeah, that'd be great. I'm always open to reading new stuff.
Other than the new speaking helping thing that will be happening in Q2, is there anything else coming up that you'd like to highlight for people?
Working on the audiobook now for my book. So my book's available on Amazon called The Upper Hand, mostly because I love making dad jokes about having a disability. But getting the upper hand about yourself is like super important for me. Um, I am going to be working on another book for next year as well, hopefully the end of next year. Our protein bar company is going really well. I would say the main thing is just speaking and putting out more content on TikTok and Instagram, and just continuing to provide people value around mental health, especially for men who think vulnerability in mental health is not allowed.
And that was Chris Ruden. Check him out on chrisruden.com. Also remember to subscribe, share, comment, and tell your friends. And on our website, learnwithlowell.com, you can see all of the episodes and see where all were found. But basically, if you have a podcast or you're on YouTube, you'll be able to check us out. Thank you for staying curious and have a great rest of your day.